What's going on, beautiful jellyfish? It's Tracy. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time in your day to hang out with me. I appreciate it. I'm going to move my mic so y'all can hear me a little bit better. In today's video, we're going to be talking about white commander staples. Oh, there's a cat in my office. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. They're actually not very disruptive in here when I film, but in case, I just don't want anything weird to happen where they're like attacking the blinds back here because they really like to look out the window. But anyways, in today's video, we're going to be talking about Commander Staples Part 1. This is for people who are just maybe getting into the format, who just want to know like what are some really good staples that if I'm buying cards or if I'm trading for cards, what are some good cards to have in your back pocket. I feel like white gets a lot of flack in Commander because people are like, it's the worst color, it's red. Sorry, something in my throat. No, I think that I actually really enjoy white as like, I feel like a splash color. Like I do have a mono white deck. I have angels and it's just basically board wipes or whatever, which I really like. I really like white's removal package, I would say. Maybe people would just give flack because like creatures might not be just as strong. I'm not really sure. But anyways, these are just some staples that I pulled out. There's actually a lot of like doubles of cards that I'm going to be mentioning because they're just really similar. So you're actually going to get more than 10 cards in this video, which is really cool. But yeah, if there are any cards that I did not mention that you want me to feature in part 2, since I only mention 10 cards, just to keep times, a little bit short so these videos are not super long. But yeah, let's just hop into it with the first card, which is a double, which is Swords to Plowshare and Path to Exile. Let's just like chat about both. I feel like some people might look at these cards and be like, oh, it exiles for 1 mana, but it gives my opponent life or it gets them a land. That doesn't really matter that much, I feel like, in Commander, I would say. Because for 1 mana, being able to just exile anything is so incredibly good. And I also feel like, too, I think it's fine to have things that destroy, but I also think it's really good to have things that exile, especially if you have someone who's playing like a recursion type of deck. So I think that's really important. Swords does gain them life equal to its power, so sometimes you're just like, kill your, exile your thing, you get 5 life, whatever. Realistically, them getting 5 life is significantly worse than whatever that creature was that you were removing. And in a very similar vein, Path to Exile does give them a land. It is also a basic, so it's not like they can just get like any land, which would be kind of silly, but yeah, this card is great. Both of these cards are definitely really good, and I don't think it's a matter of like, should I run one or the other? Like, just run both. If you're concerned about cost, Swords is cheaper than Path, but Path has also been printed like so many times at this point where I feel like you can get it for like $4 or $5, which is pretty affordable, so definitely a really good staple card. To me, this card is a staple, and I don't feel like it's enough of a staple for other people. They actually like the alternative, which I will be talking about both, and how they're similar and how they're a little bit different, and that is Crush Contraband. I personally really love this card. As soon as this card was printed, I was like, immediately, I am all about this card. I really enjoy it. Hold on. I need to take out my tea bag. Also, just to note, I like how my mug says, what does this even say? Pumpkin something? Hay rides, pumpkins, and apple cider, when it is so clearly not fall and I'm wearing a cardigan. Like, oh yeah, I'm ready for fall. Like, it's not fall, Tracy, it's spring. And here in Texas, it has been like, not, like, it has been warm. We've had like 80-degree weather, like, it is full-fledged, almost summer here. Anyways, Crush Contraband. So I feel like the reason a lot of people don't like this card is because it's one or both. And the thing about this card is it kind of makes you either pick for 4 mana at instant speed, I'm going to exile this artifact, but then there's no enchantments on the board. And so I feel like Crush Contraband is like that, depending on your play group, if you do see enchantments. My thing is, I don't feel like I typically see a lot of enchantments. However, I still like to have this card. It's also only 1 white, whereas the alternative, which we'll talk about now, is Return to Dust, and a lot of people really enjoy this card. It is double white, though, just something to note. So if you're playing this in like a multicolored deck, and that double white can be a little bit challenging to cast, it's just something to note. This card does say you exile 1 artifact or enchantment, but if you do it on your main phase, you can exile another one. So you get the option of both. So let's just say there's 2 artifacts that you want to remove and you do this during your main phase. So to me, it's kind of like I guess it just kind of like depends on your playgroup, and it just kind of like depends on the situation. If no one in your playgroup runs enchantments, like Crush Contraband's probably not going to be the best for you, because you want to get the full value of this card, because then you're only paying 4 mana to Exile, which is not that good. For my playgroup personally, I do see enchantments, so I just decide to run that card, to run Crush Contraband over this. But both are definitely good, and it just depends on your playgroup. And you know what? If there's artifacts and enchantments, both of them running rampant in your playgroup, run both. ¿Por qué no las dos? Why not? All right. Next, let's talk about some board wipes, which is like some of my favorite parts about white are these 2 board wipes in particular, which is Planar Cleansing and Hour of Revelation. These cards are extremely similar. And again, to me, it's not one or the other. It's just both. Planar Cleansing is just straight up 6 mana, just around on the impermanence. There's not really like a whole lot to say. This card's pretty basic, but I really love this. One thing to note is just the triple white. That is kind of a lot, and if you are running this in a multicolored deck, it might be a little bit challenging to cast, but don't let that deter you. This card is incredibly good. It does hit you, but my thing about board wipes like this is, if you're doing this, whatever you have on your board is definitely not as good as whatever your opponents are having. So, you know, I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to remove my stuff. It's like, you know, if that's the case, you got to think, if I'm removing stuff, it's because other people are doing things that are better than what I have, and you're just, you know, you just need to stop them. So Planar Cleansing is really, really, really good for that. It's also a very affordable card, which is great, and very similarly is Hour of Revelation. Again, one or the other. I personally just like both. I really love Hour of Revelation because if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield for 3 mana, you get to destroy non-land permanents. This is like an EDH player's like dream card, I feel like, because it's like 3 mana, I get to destroy every non-land permanent for 3 mana. 3 mana. Like, that is incredibly strong. Also, if you're concerned about there being 10 or more non-land permanents, come on, this is Commander. If you're in a 4-person game of Commander, you can very easily get this off. I've infrequently cast this card at like a full-fledged 6 mana. I swear I've probably only done it like 1 time when I was desperate. Like, it doesn't happen a lot. You're always pretty much going to be casting this card at 3 mana, which is so good. So these cards are awesome. All right, we couldn't really go a video without chatting about a tutor, and that is Enlightened Tutor. This card's awesome. It's a little bit expensive, but really good card. I think with this card is, I don't know if it necessarily goes in like every single white deck, but if you are running a handful of artifacts or enchantments, like especially if you're playing like an artifact enchantment deck, totally get Enlightened Tutor. If you're not, you know, like I still think it's good. Like I have one of these. I have this in a Leela, I think, or do I have it in Angels? I don't know. I only own one of this card. Don't even know how I own it. Do you ever like have cards where you're just like, how did I acquire this card? Because I have zero idea. I think that's like the case for that. I feel like maybe we got it in a box of Enlightened Masters, of Eternal Masters. That's what I meant to say. Yeah, this card is really good. For 1 mana, for an instant speed, you get to tutor for any artifact or enchantment in your deck, and you shuffle it and you put it on top. So best case scenario, you do this, you do it at the end of someone's turn. That way you draw it as your next card. It's not really a whole lot to say. It's a really good tutor. It is pretty expensive, but I totally think it's worth it. Okay, now let's talk about Ghostly Prison. Ghostly Prison is just kind of like those, like, regardless of what you're doing, just like, why not throw it to Ghostly Prison? You know what I mean? It's just kind of like one of those cards where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to put this in my deck because it's 3 mana, and then creatures can attack you unless they pay 2 for each attacking creature. This really, really, really hurts decks that go really wide. So any deck that is like, I have like 10 tokens or whatever, so I gotta pay 20 mana, which is crazy. But it can also definitely hurt those people who maybe are like, I'm going to play one really big thing, and then I don't necessarily have 2 mana left over to attack. And it makes people really think about their moves, and it makes people say, okay, do I want to cast this thing, or do I want to attack? And then it kind of makes people, you know, it falls into that situation. So this card is really, really, really cool. Again, I don't think it necessarily fits in like any sort of, I think you could just put this card in any deck that runs white, and I think it would just do well there, you know? It's a good card. Okay, we're also doubling up talking about Wrath of God and Day of Judgment. I had a lot of doubles. I could have talked about them single-handedly, but I was like, these are so similar that I feel like it's just good to talk about them both. Wrath of God, very simple card. You destroy every creature, and it can't be regenerated. And in a similar vein, Day of Judgment just does destroy all creatures. So again, it's one or the other, or 4 less dose. Why not run both? I think if it affects you in any way, I'm pretty sure Day is cheaper than Wrath. I don't know, I feel like both these cards are around like $2, $3, $4 or so for like the non-foil, so yeah. There's really not a whole lot to say with these cards. They're just 4 mana and they just destroy everything. If it's relevant, Wrath says they can't be regenerated. That may or may not be relevant. It's one of those, like, I don't know, it depends on, you know, if someone just has a lot of regeneration, but it can definitely be relevant. So, I like both. Okay, let's talk about a creature. I feel like, I do feel like a lot of white creatures I'm kind of like, about. But, like, Elshnorn, oh man, yeah. One of the Praetors. So incredibly good. So, Elshnorn is kind of a lot of mana. But her payoff is so incredibly good because first off, she's got Vigilance, which is awesome. Second off, she's like a 4/7, which is great. Blocking for literal days with her. Because also too, she's got Vigilance, so you just attack and then you just block with her, and like people are having a hard time killing her, especially because all their creatures get -2/2, and all of your creatures get +2/2. No, it doesn't impact her, so she doesn't get the +2/2. It does say other, but that doesn't really matter because your whole team gets buffs. I feel like best case scenario with Elshnorn is like you're running just like a token deck. And your tokens or whatever, like, things are just so cheap. You have all just these, like, 1/1s and 2/2s and whatever. And then you just play her, and suddenly your 1/1s are, like, 3/3s. And now you have, like, 8 dudes that are 1/1s. 8 1/1s. Not really that threatening. 8 3/3s. That's 24 damage, which is really good. So, she is so incredibly awesome. She is a little bit expensive, but I feel like definitely worth it. And just a really solid inclusion in a white deck. Okay, now let's talk about Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. OG Thalia. She's awesome. Like, she's so cool. She's also been printed, like, a ton of times, so it's like, pick your art, you know? She's got, like, the whole Thalia set with all the things. But, she's 2 mana. She's got First Strike. She's legendary. I don't know why I said that. It's not applicable in... Actually, no, it could be applicable in Commander if you, like, copy things, but... Anyways, non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Now, just note that this does impact you, but I really like this card because it's a Death and Taxes card, and we'll kind of know, as I've been mentioning a lot recently, I like a lot of Death and Taxes types of cards. And it makes your opponent's stuff, and your stuff as well, cost more. So I think it depends, I would say, with Thalia about what you're doing, because if you are running a lot of non-creature spells, I would just be like a little bit aware that you are going to have to pay more for it, but this can really... stop a lot of your opponents and what they're doing. And also one thing too to know is it's kind of similar to the other card that we talked about. Why am I blanking on the name? Ghostly Prison. Is it kind of like makes people think like, what do I want to do with my mana? Like, do I want to spend that extra to cast it? And then it kind of like forces people, especially like early game when like, you know, people don't have necessarily as much access to mana and they're like, oh, like I was gonna do 2 things but now I can only do 1 because I have to pay the extra 1 for it. So yeah, Thalia makes things just a little bit more complicated. It can make things more complicated for you, but I would say it's probably, you know, when you think about it too, you're one person and this is going to impact potentially 3 or more people in your Commander game, where it's like 1 person versus 3 people. You know what I mean? So it's like you're gonna impact all those other people, which I think is really good. Cool. Now let's talk about Rest in Peace. I don't feel like you need to jam Rest in Peace in like every Commander deck, for example. Also, and I feel like I've probably talked about this on my channel before, is to me there's like a couple of different cards. There's cards that like progress your board, and there's cards that stop your opponent, and then there's some cards that are hybrid of both. Progress your board, but also stop your opponent. And I think, like, Rest in Peace is just that, like, I'm just gonna stop my opponents. Now, just note that it does say everything, so this also does impact you, so if you're running any sort of Graveyard Synergy, like, don't run this card. But with Rest in Peace, is it's gonna stop everything. Everything into the graveyard. Now, I feel like Rest in Peace is a very specific spot in Commander. Like, you're not going to want to run this in every deck, and this card definitely depends, I would say, on your playgroup. But if you're, like, every person in your playgroup constantly just always has even just a little bit of Graveyard Recursion, this card's just going to totally shut someone down, absolutely pick up a Rest in Peace. But I don't think you necessarily need a Rest in Peace in, like, every deck. And this card definitely, again, just like I said, stops your opponents from totally doing things. I personally am not a huge fan of cards like this. This is just a me thing. I would personally prefer cards that either progress my board And then, or the other, I don't know if I should necessarily say that, because I do feel like I run a lot of board wipes and spot removal that only stop someone else's board, but I wouldn't personally run a card like this, but I know that this is a staple for a lot of people, and so that's why I wanted to mention it. This card is obviously like extremely good, and in the right play group, I think it's great. And the last card is Smothering Tithe. Why is that hard for me to say? This card's awesome. It's 4 mana. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they may pay 2. If they don't, you just create a treasure. Like, this card's so good. So good. This card reminds me a little bit of, like, Rhystic Study in a way. But except you draw cards, and instead out of this, you get mana, which is so good. I actually probably need to pick up one of these for, yeah, I need to pick up one of these. I need to get one of these for Avacyn, actually. But this card's, like, a little bit expensive last time I checked. But this card's awesome. So incredibly good. I like it because it kind of similar to other cards we've mentioned is it kind of makes your opponent's turn a little bit more complicated. And I'm kind of just always a fan of, like, whatever, I'm just like, oh, I stopped you from doing, instead of doing 3 things, you only could do 2 or 1. Like, I really enjoy that. And I think Smothering Tide's definitely one of those cards that does it. And it not only just makes your opponents really think, like, do I really care? Do I really need to pay this to you? Or do I just want to give you the treasure? So that you can just stack up a lot of treasures depending on those cards that they draw. So this card is super awesome. I definitely think a card that's worth it. I think I chatted about this card in, like, EDH cards worth the money because this card's great. So, yeah, guys, that is it. That is it for 10, well, there was a little bit more than 10 in this video, EDH white staples. I'd really like to know what white staples you find in Commander. I think I might already have part 2 mapped out. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll definitely be doing more of these because there's just a lot of really good staples, and especially with stuff just always coming out, there's just a lot of stuff to chat about. So I'd really love to know your favorite white staples in a comment below. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I'll catch you in my next one.